My name is Nathan Walker. Most folks around here just call me Nate. I've spent nearly my entire life in a place called Black Timber Hollow, a logging settlement buried deep in the north woods of Maine, a good 40 miles past the last gas station and even farther past anything resembling civilization. Out here, the forest doesn't end. The spruce trees climb so high they seem to prop up the sky itself, and in winter, the snow falls thick enough to swallow porches whole. Some mornings, you wake up and the world's been erased overnight. This winter came down hard, bitter, personal. The kind of cold that doesn't just sting your skin, it seeps into your bones and tries to make a home there. I was walking the narrow trail that cut between the Harper place and the old logging road when I saw them. Emily Harper, 15 years old, but already carrying herself like someone twice that age. She had that look, guarded, sharp, almost feral. Her coat was too thin for January, zipper busted halfway down. Red blotches burned across her cheeks from the wind. Leaning against the fence beside her was Jason Cole, 30 years old. Thinning hair shaved down close like that made it better. Wore a leather jacket year-round and rode a beat-up Harley that rattled windows 3 houses away. He stood too close to her, grinning, talking low, selling something, maybe promises, maybe escape. Her fingers were hooked tight into the splintered fence board like she needed something solid to hold on to. Something in my chest went hot. Emily's mother, Veronica Harper, had been drinking herself into the ground for the better part of a decade. 4 younger kids crammed into that sagging house, always hungry, always dirty, always waiting for someone to remember they existed. I'd bring venison when I could, rabbit sometimes, a slab of pork from last season's hog. I told myself it was charity. Truth is, I felt responsible. I don't have a family. Not anymore. 20 years ago, on a black stretch of highway outside Bangor, I tried to pass a truck I should have stayed behind. Roads were slick. I was young and certain I knew better than physics. I remember the headlights blooming too wide. I remember my wife's hand grabbing mine. I remember my son in the back seat asking if we were almost home. Then I remember nothing. The state trooper told me later the other driver shouldn't have been there. Wrong lane, overweight rig. Didn't matter. I made the choice. I crossed that line. Since then, it's been just me and the woods. "Emily," I called out before I reached them. "You ought to be home." Jason straightened, flashing that easy grin. "We're just talking, Nate." I ignored him. "Your mom's drunk again. Stove's cold. I left venison on the porch. Feed your brothers." Emily rolled her eyes but didn't argue. She knew better than to push when my voice went flat like that. She adjusted her scarf and started toward the house without looking at either of us. Jason lingered. "You're not her father," he muttered. I stepped closer, close enough he could smell wood smoke in my coat. "No," I said quietly, "but I'm the one standing here." He looked at my hands, looked at my shoulders. Then he backed off, fiddling with his bike, kicking it alive in a hurry. I watched him ride off until the engine noise dissolved into the trees. The sun was barely a pale smear behind the forest line when I left the hollow and headed toward Old Man Whitaker's farm. A lynx had been taking his sheep, 3 in 1 week. Clean kills, no waste. Smart animal. Hunting a lynx isn't like setting snares for rabbits. You don't rush it, you outthink it. I'd set the traps the evening before, boiled the steel in spruce needles to kill the scent, handled everything with gloves. A lynx can smell metal the way we smell smoke. I'd buried the trap beneath a clean cut of crusted snow, reset the surface carefully. No crumbs, no disturbance. Out here, you miss one detail and you go home empty-handed. At the tree line, I ran into Eli Granger, the town's beekeeper and part-time prophet of doom. He was poking at something in a drift with a walking stick. "You won't catch her easy," Eli rasped. "Saw her last night, high in the trees. Smart cat." "I'll manage," I said. He lifted one finger. "When the birds go quiet, that's when she's near." I nodded and kept moving. Near the grove of young birch, I saw it. Snow torn up, chain pulled tight into the brush. The trap had sprung. I approached slow, no sudden movements. The chain disappeared into a thicket of wild raspberry bramble. Blood speckled the snow in dark, frozen bursts. Then I heard it. A low, rolling growl. Not quite feline. Not quite anything I'd heard before. I circled the brush. What crouched inside wasn't a lynx. It was a massive wildcat, bigger than any bobcat I'd ever seen, nearly the size of a German shepherd. Thick shoulders, ragged ear torn halfway down. Fur, a tangled mix of rust and dark brown. Its yellow eyes burned in the half-light. The trap had crushed its front leg. It should have lunged. It didn't. It trembled instead, fury and pain tangled together. I raised my rifle and lowered it. Something about it stopped me. Maybe the way it stared straight at me. Not wild panic, not submission. Just raw, stubborn life. "Easy," I muttered. I slung the rifle behind me and pulled a length of rope from my pack. Slow, careful. One wrong move and I'd lose a hand. It hissed and snapped, but pain made it slow. I looped the rope over its neck, kept distance, knelt, and pried open the steel jaws. The cat screamed, a sound that scraped straight down my spine. Then I wrapped it tight in my spare coat before it could rake me open. It weighed close to 70 pounds. Carried it all the way home through knee-deep snow while it twisted and growled against my back. By the time I reached my cabin, we were both breathing hard. Inside, by the stove, it went still. The leg was broken clean. I poured whiskey over the wound. It snapped at me, teeth flashing white, but I held it firm with my knee and set the bone as straight as I could. Splinted it with shaved cedar strips, wrapped it tight. When I set down a bowl of warm milk, it stared at me long and hard. Then it drank. That's how he stayed. I named him Ash. The first weeks were hell. He wasn't tame, not even close. I kept him tethered near the stove while the leg healed, slept with my rifle beside the bed, fed him on a long-handled shovel at first. Gradually, the rage dulled. He stopped lunging, started watching instead. Always watching. About a month in, Emily came by one evening while snow rattled against the windows. She looked exhausted, pale. "My brothers are sick," she said. "We're out of firewood." I handed her tea, dried raspberries, honey. I turned to grab something from the cupboard, and when I looked back, my heart stopped. She was kneeling beside Ash. Her hand rested on his torn ear. "Don't," I started, but he didn't move, didn't hiss, didn't bare his teeth. He leaned into her palm. A deep, vibrating rumble filled the room. She smiled, small and sad. "Guess he's lonely," she whispered. "Like you." Something shifted in that moment. I didn't understand it then, but I would. Because 2 months later, when the snow began to melt and the logging company cut their first swath of forest beyond the ridge, things in Black Timber Hollow started to change, and the woods began to go quiet. Spring didn't arrive in Black Timber Hollow so much as it rotted its way in. The snow didn't melt clean. It sagged, grayed, collapsed into filthy slush that exposed everything winter had hidden. Broken fence posts, empty bottles, rusted tools half buried in the yard. The forest floor turned soft and sour-smelling, like something breathing underneath it. Ash healed faster than I expected. The splint came off by late March. The leg held. He favored it at first, but within weeks he moved like nothing had ever happened. If anything, he seemed larger, broader across the shoulders. His coat thickened instead of thinning with the season, fur dark and dense, almost oily in the way it caught light. He never became a house cat. He never purred for me the way he did for Emily, but he stayed. Most days he perched in the window, staring toward the tree line, not watching birds, watching something deeper. Emily started coming by more often, sometimes for food, sometimes for wood, sometimes for no reason at all. She'd sit cross-legged on the cabin floor while Ash rested his heavy head against her knee. She talked to him softly, things she didn't say to me. One evening, I stepped outside to split kindling and overheard her through the cracked window. "I don't want to be stuck here forever," she whispered to him. "I won't rot here." Ash's tail flicked once. He stared at her the way he'd stared at me in that trap, like he understood. Jason's bike showed up more and more as the snow retreated, sometimes parked down the road, sometimes bold enough to sit right outside the Harper place. I'd see him leaning against it, smoking, waiting, watching. And Emily would come out. At first, she kept distance. Then she stood closer. Then she didn't pull away when he touched her arm. It made something ugly crawl up my spine. One late afternoon, I caught them near the logging road, the same stretch where the ground dips toward the marsh. Jason had her by the waist. She wasn't fighting him. She wasn't exactly welcoming it either. She just looked tired. I stepped out of the trees without saying a word. Jason saw me first. His grin faltered. Emily stiffened. "Evening," I said. Jason pulled his hand back, slow. "You stalking us now?" "I live here," I replied. "You don't." Emily's jaw tightened. "I'm not a kid." "No," I said. "You're not," Jason smirked. "We're just talking." "You do a lot of talking," I said. Funny how it only happens when her mom's passed out. His eyes darkened. He stepped toward me. For a second, I thought he might swing. Instead, he spat near my boot and climbed onto his bike. Engine roared. He peeled out, spraying gravel. Emily didn't look at me. "Don't," she muttered. "Don't what?" "Don't act like you own me." I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. She walked away before I found words. Ash was waiting on the porch when I got home, standing, not sitting, standing stiff, ears pinned toward the logging ridge, low growl humming in his chest. I followed his gaze. Beyond the trees, faint but steady, came the sound of engines. The logging company had arrived in force. By early May, they'd carved a raw wound into the hillside beyond town. Bulldozers, excavators, floodlights for night shifts, trucks running even after dark. They said it was timber rights. They said it was jobs. But they fenced off one particular section near Black Ridge and posted armed security. No signs, no explanations, just razor wire and floodlights. Eli Granger claimed he saw helicopters come in at night. Semis without company logos.
men in gray uniforms instead of flannel. Most folks shrugged it off. We were too small to question things that big. Then the animals started disappearing. Not hunted, not killed, gone. No tracks, no blood, no drag marks, just absence. Whitaker lost 2 sheep in a single night, and there wasn't so much as a tuft of wool left behind. Coyotes stopped howling, birdsong thinned, even the insects seemed quieter. Ash stopped wandering. He stayed close to the cabin, restless, pacing. Sometimes he'd freeze mid-step and stare toward the ridge, fur bristling along his spine. One night he woke me, not with noise, with presence. I opened my eyes to find him standing on my chest, 70 pounds of muscle pressing down.
His eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the window. The room felt wrong, heavy, like the air pressure had shifted. I rolled out of bed and stepped to the glass. At first I saw nothing. Then I saw movement. High above the tree line, a faint purple flicker, gone as quickly as it appeared. The next day, Emily came by in a loose sweatshirt, despite the warming air. She looked thinner, palms restless. Ash circled her twice before settling unusually still at her feet. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded too fast. Jason's bike roared down the road right on cue. She flinched. "I gotta go," she said. "Emily." She paused in the doorway. "If he ever hurts you." "He doesn't," she snapped. The lie hung there between us. She left. Ash didn't move for a long time. Late that night, thunder rolled, but there were no clouds, no lightning, just a low, sustained vibration that rattled the windows. The power flickered once, twice, then steadied. I stepped outside. The sky over Black Ridge glowed faintly violet, like heat lightning trapped behind the trees. And then, silence. Not natural silence. Total. No wind, no frogs, no crickets. Nothing. Ash stepped out beside me. His body lowered close to the ground, ears flat, teeth exposed. A sound rolled through the woods then. Not mechanical, not animal. A deep, resonant hum, like something enormous drawing breath and exhaling. The next morning, the logging fence had doubled in height, and there were new guards, armed, watching. By the end of May, Emily stopped smiling entirely. She still came by, still sat beside Ash, but her hands shook sometimes. And once, just once, when she leaned forward to scratch behind his ear, her sweatshirt shifted. I saw the bruise blooming along her ribs, deep purple, finger-shaped. I didn't say anything right away. I just stared. She noticed, pulled the fabric down fast. "It's nothing," she muttered. I didn't push. Not yet. But something inside me started calculating. Jason, the ridge, the fence, the way Ash growled at empty air some nights, the way the forest felt like it was holding its breath. Somewhere beyond those floodlights, something had been unearthed. Something that didn't belong. And whatever it was waking up. Spring kept rotting forward, and with it, something inside Black Timber Hollow began to feel displaced. Not destroyed, not invaded, displaced. Like the forest had been nudged half an inch out of alignment. The logging company fenced off more land by June. What they'd carved into Black Ridge no longer looked like timber work. It looked surgical. Trees removed in perfect radius. Soil stripped down to clay. Floodlights erected in a circle that burned through the night like a second artificial sun. And at the center of it all, though most folks in town pretended not to know, stood that thing, the black structure. I hadn't told anyone else what I'd seen that winter.
Not the guards, not the man dragged forward, not the way the body disappeared without a sound. Some truths don't survive daylight. But the forest remembered. You could feel it. Bird migration shifted early. Deer trails rerouted wide around the ridge. Even the creek that ran down from that direction tasted metallic by mid-June. I noticed it when I filled a bucket and caught the faint copper scent on my hands. Ash refused to drink from it. He would sniff, flatten his ears, and back away. At night, he grew restless. Not pacing, listening. Sometimes he'd sit in the doorway, staring into darkness with his pupils blown wide, tracking something I couldn't see. Once, just once, I followed his gaze long enough to notice movement between the trees. Not walking, sliding, like a shadow detached from its owner. It vanished when I blinked. I told myself it was wind. There wasn't any wind. Emily came by less often that month. When she did, she looked thinner, sharper around the cheekbones.
Her movements slower, like she was measuring every breath. The bruise on her ribs had yellowed into fading green. The one at her jaw hadn't. Jason's Harley showed up daily now, sometimes parked boldly in front of her mother's place, sometimes behind the shed, like secrecy meant something in a town this small. I ran into him outside the feed store one afternoon. He looked different, harder. There's a look men get when they've crossed a line and realized no one stopped them. "That ridge paying good?" I asked casually. He blinked. "What? You've been hauling up there, haven't you?" He hesitated half a second too long. "Just driving supplies," he muttered. "Good money. Better than trapping squirrels all winter." I didn't rise to it. "Funny," I said. "Doesn't look like logging up there." He smirked. "You should mind your business, Nate." "I do." His smile didn't reach his eyes. That night, the hum returned, stronger. Not thunder, not machinery. Something resonant, low frequency. It vibrated through the floorboards, through bone. Ash reacted immediately. He didn't growl this time. He whimpered. I had never heard that sound come out of him before. He backed into the corner by the stove, fur bristling, claws digging into the wood as if the ground itself had betrayed him. Outside, a faint violet glow pulsed behind the tree line. Once, twice, then steadied. I stepped out onto the porch despite every instinct telling me not to. The air felt wrong, too dense, like walking through warm water. My ears popped as if pressure had shifted. The glow intensified, not bright, but deep, like something burning inward instead of outward. And then, a scream. Distant, human, cut off abruptly. Silence swallowed it whole. The hum ceased. The night went completely still. Ash bolted past me into the yard, then stopped dead at the property line, staring toward the ridge. His tail lashed violently. He was trembling. The next morning, 3 logging trucks were gone. So were 5 workers. Official word was equipment malfunction and temporary relocation. No one believed it, but no one pressed either. Money had started flowing into town, repairs, supplies, new generators donated to the community center. Fear has a way of softening when it's padded with cash. 2 weeks later, Emily showed up at my cabin just before dusk. She didn't knock. She stumbled in. Ash was at her side before I could even stand. Her lip was split again. Worse, her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the back of a chair to stay upright.
"He's different,"
she whispered. "Jason?" She nodded.
"He talks in his sleep now."
I waited.
He says things.
What kind of things? She swallowed.
Numbers, coordinates, and he says it's hungry.
The word hung heavy. My stomach tightened. When does he talk like that?
After he comes back from the ridge.
That confirmed what I already suspected. Jason wasn't just hauling supplies. He was inside the fence, closer to the monolith than most. Ash pressed his head against her stomach suddenly, not gently, insistently. Emily stiffened.
I haven't told anyone yet,
she said. Told. My eyes dropped. The oversized sweatshirt, the way she held herself. How far? I asked quietly.
Almost 3 months.
My jaw clenched. Does he know?
He says it might not be his.
The room went cold, despite the stove burning strong. Ash began pacing tight circles around her, low growl vibrating deep in his chest.
He stands outside at night, she continued. Just stands there looking at the woods, like he's waiting for something.
A knock sounded at the cabin door, not loud, not aggressive. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Emily froze. Ash turned toward the door, and something changed in him. His posture shifted lower, predatory. His pupils dilated until his eyes were nearly black. The knock came again. 3 taps, even spacing. I reached for the shotgun by the wall, opened the door. No one stood there. The yard was empty, but the tree line, 30 yards out, looked closer. Not physically, visually, like depth had collapsed slightly. I stepped forward cautiously. The ground felt uneven beneath my boots. Ash brushed past me and stopped at the edge of the clearing. He stared straight ahead, into nothing. Then he bared his teeth. A shape flickered between 2 trees, not moving through space, phasing, like interference on old television static. Tall, wrong proportions, limbs slightly too long. It vanished. Emily grabbed my arm. You saw that, right? I didn't answer, because behind us, from inside the cabin, came the sound of something heavy shifting. Slowly, deliberately. We both turned. The stove, the table, the chair, all exactly where they should be. But the air inside the doorway shimmered faintly, like heat distortion. Ash lunged forward with a roar that didn't sound entirely feline. He swiped at empty space, and something invisible hit him back, hard. He flew sideways into the woodpile with a thud that knocked the breath out of me. The shimmer intensified for half a second, then snapped out of existence. Silence returned. Ash struggled up immediately, fur standing on end, eyes blazing. Emily's breathing was ragged. It followed me, she whispered. A cold certainty settled into my bones. Whatever was happening at Black Ridge, it wasn't staying contained. And Jason wasn't just bringing home bruises and whiskey. He was bringing something else back with him. Something that had started to notice Emily, and something that had just stepped onto my land. Ash didn't calm down for a long time. He prowled the perimeter of the cabin until dawn, stopping every few feet to sniff the air, then staring into the trees like he could see layers of the world I couldn't. I kept the shotgun within arm's reach and didn't sleep. Emily sat at the table most of the night, wrapped in one of my old flannel jackets, staring at the floorboards. It doesn't just stand there, she said quietly around 3 in the morning. Sometimes it's closer when I blink. I didn't ask how long she'd been seeing it. Some answers don't help. When first light finally bled into the sky, the forest looked normal again. Birds tested the air cautiously. A squirrel darted along the fence line. But Ash refused to relax. He kept glancing at Emily's stomach, not in confusion, in recognition. By mid-morning, I'd made up my mind. "You're not going back there," I told her. She looked up sharply. "I have to." "No. He'll come looking." "Let him." She gave me a hollow laugh. "You think he's the worst thing following me?" That shut me up. I drove her back anyway, not to send her inside, but to see for myself. Jason's Harley wasn't there. Neither was his truck. The yard looked abandoned, but the front door stood slightly ajar. Ash stayed in the truck at first, restless, pacing inside the cab. I stepped out slowly, boots crunching gravel too loud in the stillness. "Jason!" I called. No answer. The door creaked when I pushed it. The smell hit first. Not rot. Not yet. Ozone. Like air after lightning. The living room was overturned. Table flipped. Glass shattered. One wall bore deep gouges that ran floor to ceiling. Not claw marks exactly. More like something had pressed into the wood from the inside and dragged outward. Emily stepped in behind me despite my raised hand. Her breath caught. On the far wall, written in something dark and still tacky, were numbers, coordinates. Same cadence she'd described. Below them, one word. Open. Ash leapt from the truck and barreled past us into the house, nose low, tracking something frantic and invisible. He stopped in the hallway that led to the bedroom. His ears flattened. A low growl began building in his chest. We followed. Jason lay on the bedroom floor, alive, barely. His body was twisted at an unnatural angle, as if he'd been dropped from height and folded wrong on impact. His eyes were open, too wide, pupils dilated nearly black. His lips moved. No sound came out at first. Then, "It's closer," he whispered. Emily fell to her knees beside him. "What happened?" she breathed. His gaze snapped to her stomach, and he smiled. Not warmly, not kindly. Recognition. "It knows you," he rasped. Ash lunged forward so violently I had to grab his scruff to keep him from tearing Jason's throat out. Jason's fingers twitched, scraping weakly at the floorboards. "They said it needed an anchor," he continued. "Something growing." My blood ran cold. "Who said?" I demanded. His eyes drifted toward the window, toward the ridge. "It doesn't stay contained," he murmured. "It spreads through openings." His back arched suddenly, hard, like something invisible had hooked a wire into his spine and yanked. Emily screamed. Jason's body lifted inches off the floor, not metaphorically, physically. Ash howled, a deep, feral sound I had never heard from any animal before, and snapped at the air above Jason's chest. The air shimmered again. Violet sparks flickered across nothingness. Jason's mouth opened wider than it should have, far wider. His jaw strained, tendons standing out like cables. Then something moved inside his throat, pushing outward. A bulge traveled up beneath his skin. Ash leapt. He clamped his jaws onto empty space directly above Jason's chest and wrenched sideways with every pound of muscle he had. There was a sound, like wet fabric tearing underwater. Jason crashed back to the floor, gasping violently. The shimmer snapped out. Ash staggered back, spitting something invisible from his mouth, fur bristling violently. Jason lay still, breathing shallow, alive. But whatever had been trying to push through him wasn't. For now. Emily sobbed openly. I pulled her back. "We're leaving," I said. "Where?" she choked. "Anywhere not here." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't that simple. Because outside, beyond the shattered window, the forest had gone quiet again. Not watchful, expectant. And somewhere deep beyond Black Ridge, the hum started building once more. Low, resonant, hungry. Ash moved in front of Emily, positioning himself between her and the trees. Not afraid, protective. The same way he'd looked the night I found him in that trap. Like he'd been fighting this thing far longer than I had. And now, it had found what it was looking for. Not Jason, not me. Her. Something ancient had been pulled from beneath that ridge. Something that needed a doorway. And Emily, with life growing inside her, was beginning to look exactly like one. The hum didn't stop this time. It deepened, like something far underground had shifted its weight. I got Emily into the truck while Ash refused to break eye contact with the tree line. Jason was still breathing on the bedroom floor, but I didn't try to lift him. Whatever had tried to climb out of him wasn't finished, and I wasn't staying long enough to see round two. As we pulled away, I saw movement near the ridge. Not lights, not trucks. Shadows moving against the daylight. Tall, elongated distortions sliding between the trunks like oil on glass. Emily kept one hand over her stomach the whole ride back. "Is it still there?" I asked quietly. She didn't need to ask what I meant. "Yes." Not a guess. A certainty. Back at my cabin, Ash circled her twice before lying down directly at her feet. He didn't blink, didn't relax. He was tracking something that wasn't bound by walls. By afternoon, the town was buzzing. 2 more workers missing. One security guard hospitalized after equipment malfunction. Eli Granger swore the bees in his hives were dying mid-flight, dropping straight out of the air. Semis rolled through town headed for the ridge. More fencing, more generators, more armed men. Containment. That's what they were trying to do. They were too late. Near sunset, a convoy of black SUVs rolled into Black Timber Hollow. Unmarked. Government plates. Men in gray stepped out, not loggers, not local law. They moved house to house, asking questions, scanning. One of them knocked on my cabin door. 3 slow taps. The same rhythm from the night before. Ash's growl started low and immediate. I opened the door with the shotgun visible over my shoulder. The man standing there looked clean, clinical, early 40s, no insignia, no name badge. "You're Nathan Walker," he said, not a question. "Yes?" "We need to ask about unusual activity in this area." "Define unusual." His eyes flicked past me, to Emily. His gaze lingered on her stomach just a second too long. My grip tightened on the door frame. "We've detected biological resonance outside the primary zone," he continued evenly. "If you've experienced auditory phenomena, light distortions, behavioral changes in wildlife—" "Wildlife?" I cut in. "You mean when it throws men around like rag dolls?" His expression didn't change, so he knew. "It's a contained anomaly," he said. "We are managing it." "By feeding it?" I asked quietly. That made him pause. Behind him, one of the other gray-suited men stepped forward with a handheld device. It emitted a faint clicking noise. Ash stepped into view. The clicking spiked violently. The second man frowned. "That animal," he said. "It's been exposed." "Get off my land," I said flatly. The first man's eyes returned to Emily. "There is a vector we're tracking," he said. We believe it may attempt to migrate via biological growth cycles. Emily went pale. "You're not taking her," I said. His gaze finally sharpened. "You don't understand what's at stake." "I understand plenty." Ash moved forward, not threatening, steady. The clicking device began to scream. The gray-suited men exchanged a look. Then, for the first time, uncertainty crossed the spokesman's face. "It's already interacting," the second man muttered. "With the animal?" the first asked. "No, through it." Ash's pupils were fully blown now, but he wasn't looking at them. He was staring at the man's chest, at something just slightly out of phase with reality. The air shimmered faintly around the spokesman's torso. I saw it then, a distortion, faint, like a heat mirage clinging to him. It hadn't just stayed at the ridge, it had learned to hitch rides. The man seemed to realize it at the same moment I did. He staggered slightly, his breath hitched. Behind him, one of the SUVs flickered, just briefly, like its shape couldn't decide on its own dimensions. Ash lunged. He hit the man square in the chest. There was no blood, no visible wound, but something tore loose with a wet, electric snap. The shimmer collapsed violently. The spokesman dropped to his knees. The distortion between him and the air unraveled like smoke in a vacuum. Ash landed lightly, teeth bared. The clicking device went silent. The gray-suited men backed away. One of them raised his weapon. Not a standard rifle, sleek, angular. I leveled my shotgun instantly. "No," I said. We held that standoff for a full 10 seconds. Then the spokesman raised a shaking hand. "Stand down," he croaked. They lowered the weapon. He stood slowly, eyes now fully human. Whatever had been attached to him was gone. He looked at Ash differently now. Not as contamination, as resistance. "It's adapting faster than predicted," he muttered to his team. Then to me, "If it anchors fully, it won't be contained by geography anymore." "Anchors how?" I demanded. His gaze flicked once more to Emily's stomach. My pulse hammered. "Growth," he said quietly. "It requires developing neural pathways." "You mean a child?" I said. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. They retreated after that. No arrests, no forced removal, just one last warning before climbing back into the SUVs. "If you notice acceleration," he said, "call this number." He handed me a card with no agency listed, just digits. They left in a plume of dust. The forest exhaled slowly after their engines faded. Emily was shaking. "They want the baby," she whispered. "No," I said. "It wants the baby." Ash walked back to her and pressed his head firmly against her abdomen again. Not violent, protective, like he could sense a frequency humming beneath the surface of her skin. And for the first time since this started, I felt something else under the fear. A pattern. Ash had been caught in a trap near the ridge, injured, exposed. But instead of becoming a doorway, he'd become a barrier. Whatever this thing was, it couldn't fully pass through him, which meant it needed something else, something new, something still forming. The hum in the distance grew slightly louder, not angry, anticipatory. Black Ridge pulsed faintly violet as dusk settled in. The containment fence lights flickered, one by one, and somewhere beneath that earth, the monolith was no longer dormant. It was reaching, and this time, it knew exactly where to reach next. Night came down heavy, pressing against the cabin walls like a living thing. The ridge glowed faintly in the distance, not bright enough to alarm the town, but steady, persistent, like a pulse beneath skin. Emily hadn't left. I wouldn't let her. We pushed the couch against the door. Nailed the back windows shut. Not that wood would stop something that could slit between atoms, but men still walked upright in this world, and sometimes it was men you had to worry about first. Ash refused to lie down. He paced from one wall to the other, claws ticking against the floorboards, ears twitching at sounds too subtle for me to hear. Around midnight, the hum shifted. It wasn't distant anymore. It was directional, coming closer. The air pressure in the room dipped, then rose. My ears popped painfully. The stove flame bent sideways, though no draft touched it. Emily gasped and clutched her stomach. "It's moving," she whispered. The words froze my blood. Ash stopped pacing. He turned slowly toward the front door. 3 slow knocks echoed through the wood. Not loud, measured, deliberate. The same rhythm as before. I didn't move. Neither did Emily. Ash's fur lifted along his spine like a ridge of blades. The knocks came again. But this time, they weren't on the door. They were on the walls. All 4 of them. Soft, testing. Like something blind learning the shape of a room. The boards groaned. The windows flexed inward. Ash let out a sound I had never heard before. Not a growl, not a roar. A warning. Deep, layered, almost harmonic. The air shimmered near the ceiling. Violet threads flickered into existence, stretching down like searching tendrils. They didn't move through space. They folded it. One moment they were near the rafters, the next, inches from Emily. She screamed. I fired the shotgun instinctively. The blast shattered the nearest window and blew splinters from the wall. But the tendrils weren't matter. They weren't there in any way a pellet could touch. Ash launched himself upward, and this time, he connected. His jaws snapped shut around something invisible but solid. The room detonated in sound. A high-frequency shriek ripped through the cabin, shattering glass and knocking me to my knees. The violet thread spasmed violently. Ash held on, muscles straining, claws digging into empty air. The thing pulled upward. Ash dug in harder. Emily collapsed to the floor, as if something had been pried loose from inside her. The tendrils began retracting. Ash twisted midair and tore downward with every ounce of weight in his body. There was a tearing sensation in the air, like fabric ripping across dimensions. A flash of blinding violet. Then, darkness. Not power outage darkness. Absence. For a full second, the world ceased. No sound, no gravity, no time. Then everything snapped back into place. The stove relit itself. The broken glass settled. Ash hit the floor hard, but immediately scrambled up, teeth bared, eyes blazing. The pressure was gone. The hum receded violently toward the ridge, as if something had been wounded and forced to retreat. Emily lay curled on her side. I crawled to her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "I felt it," she whispered. "It was inside my head." Ash walked over slowly. He pressed his forehead to hers. The cabin felt quieter. Not empty, balanced. For now. Outside, a distant explosion echoed from Black Ridge. Not a blast, a collapse. Something structural giving way. I stepped onto the porch cautiously. The sky above the ridge flickered erratically. The violet glow strobed out of rhythm. The containment lights blinked and died section by section. Sirens wailed faintly from the direction of the site. Ash joined me. He stared at the ridge, and for the first time since this began, he didn't growl. He watched, as if waiting to see what would crawl out next. Because something had changed. The thing hadn't just reached for Emily. It had recognized resistance. Ash wasn't just blocking it, he was interfering with it, like a frequency canceling another frequency.
Inside, Emily's breathing steadied. I could feel something shift in the air, subtle, like tension redistributed. Not gone, recalculated.
And deep beneath Black Ridge, the hum didn't stop. It adapted. Lower, slower, thinking. Whatever that monolith was, it wasn't just an object. It was learning. And now, it knew it couldn't take what it wanted by force, so it would try something else. The next morning, the government SUVs returned. Only this time, they didn't stop at the fence. They drove straight into town. And they weren't asking questions anymore. They were evacuating people. By sunrise, the town was no longer pretending. Black SUVs idled at every intersection of Black Timber Hollow. Men in gray moved door to door, firm now, no masks of courtesy. Loudspeakers crackled with calm, rehearsed instructions. Temporary evacuation, environmental hazard, gather essentials only. Environmental hazard. That's what they called it when reality tore open. I stood on my porch, with the shotgun resting against my leg, Ash at my side, Emily behind me, wrapped in a heavy coat. Trucks rolled past toward the ridge, armored this time. Something larger than containment. Something desperate. The spokesman from before stepped out of one of the vehicles and walked toward me. He looked exhausted, pale. It breached containment at 0317, he said without greeting. I noticed. The monolith destabilized after a resonance event. Call it what it was, I replied. It tried to cross over. His jaw tightened. We're initiating a full collapse protocol. Meaning, we destroy the site. I stared at him. Blow it up? Not exactly. He hesitated. The structure isn't extraterrestrial, he continued carefully. It's terrestrial. Older than this forest, possibly older than recorded history. It exists partially out of phase with our spatial dimension. I didn't care about the science. Can you kill it? Silence. That's not the correct question. Behind me, Emily flinched. Ash stood perfectly still. The spokesman's eyes moved to him again. That animal disrupted a transfer event, he said. We recorded a spike in counter frequency. He saved her. Yes. A pause. Which means it will escalate. As if summoned by the word, the ground trembled. Not violently, but deep. From the ridge came a sound like stone grinding against stone beneath miles of earth. The sky flickered faintly violet again, not pulsing, expanding. The evacuation sirens shifted pitch, higher, urgent. A column of black smoke began rising from the ridge. They're triggering it early, the spokesman muttered. Triggering what? Dimensional collapse. I didn't like the sound of that. Ash suddenly stepped off the porch and into the yard, slowly, deliberately. He wasn't looking at the ridge. He was looking at the town, at the people loading into trucks, at the children crying, at Emily. Then he did something he had never done before. He walked away from the cabin, toward Black Ridge. Emily's breath caught. No, she whispered. Ash didn't look back. I followed immediately. The spokesman shouted something behind me, but I ignored it. Ash moved with purpose, not fear. Through the trees, over fallen trunks, straight toward the source. The closer we got, the stranger the air became. Gravity felt uneven. Depth perception flickered. The world looked slightly misaligned, like reality had been nudged sideways. When we broke through the final tree line, the fence was down. Not destroyed, bent outward, like something inside had pushed. At the center of the clearing stood the monolith, cracked, fractured along jagged seams that glowed violet from within. The smooth black surface now rippled slowly, like a breathing lung.
Around it, equipment lay twisted and abandoned. Men in gray scrambled to set up some kind of device, a ring of emitters forming a wide circle around the stone. The spokesman caught up behind me, panting.
"We collapse the phase field. It implodes," he said. "And if it doesn't?" He didn't answer. Ash stepped through the broken fence line. No one tried to stop him. The clicking devices the agents carried began screaming again. Ash approached the monolith. The glow intensified. Violet light spilled from the fractures, casting long, distorted shadows that moved independently from their sources. A voice filled the clearing, not audible, felt, inside the skull. It wasn't language, it was intent, hunger, expansion. Emily screamed somewhere behind me and dropped to her knees, clutching her head. Ash didn't hesitate. He leapt, not at the cracks, at the center. He hit the monolith full force. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then, the entire surface liquefied. Ash sank halfway into the stone. The scream that tore through the air wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was layered, multiplied, furious. The violet light flared blinding white. The agents activated the emitters. A deep bass tone rolled outward from the ring. Ash's body arched inside the monolith, not consumed, embedded. The glow shifted color, from violet to deep amber, warm, steady. The fractures spread wildly across the surface, cracks racing like lightning frozen in stone. The monolith convulsed. The ground split beneath it. The bass tone from the emitters intensified until my vision blurred. Then, the stone imploded, not exploded, folded inward on itself like a collapsing star. Light sucked inward, sound cut off instantly. A vacuum. Then, silence. The clearing was empty. No monolith, no glow, no hum. Only a blackened circle of earth where it had stood. The emitters fizzled out one by one. Smoke drifted lazily upward. Ash was gone. Emily's sob broke the silence. I ran to the center of the clearing, ignoring the agents shouting behind me. There was nothing left. No body, no trace, just scorched soil still warm beneath my palm. The spokesman approached slowly. "It's collapsed," he said. "Is it dead?" I asked. He hesitated. "It's sealed." That wasn't the same thing. Emily stumbled forward and knelt beside the scorched earth. Her breathing slowed, her hands relaxed. "It's quiet," she whispered. I looked at her, truly looked. The tension that had wrapped around her for months was gone. Whatever had been reaching for her couldn't anymore. The agents began packing up equipment. Evacuation orders reversed within hours. Official reports would call it a geological anomaly, equipment malfunction, forest gas ignition. The town would accept whatever version hurt the least. But that night, when we returned to the cabin, the woods sounded normal. Wind through spruce, crickets, distant owl. And for the first time in months, no hum. Emily stood in the doorway a long time before going inside. "I felt him," she said quietly. "Who?" "Ash." My throat tightened. "Where?" She rested a hand over her stomach. "Not like before," she said. "Not something trying to get in." A pause. Something staying. I didn't know what that meant. Maybe I didn't want to. Weeks passed. The ridge remained empty. The government never returned. Jason was transferred to a psychiatric facility 3 states away after claiming the stone still breathes. Veronica drank herself into silence. Life, stubborn as weeds, kept moving. On the first cool night of early fall, I sat on the porch alone.
The forest stretched dark and endless beyond the clearing. For a moment, just a flicker, two yellow eyes reflected from between the trees, low to the ground, watching, not hungry, not angry, steady, protective. I didn't move, didn't call out. The eyes blinked once, then vanished into the black timber. The woods exhaled softly, and for the first time since that winter trap snapped shut, Black Timber Hollow felt like home again.